Exploring stories, surviving the waves, the tale of three teenage sailors. In the tranquil Pacific archipelago of Tokelau, just off the coast of New Zealand, sailing from one island to the next is a commonplace as catching a bus in the city. The islands are so close together that a short sail is often all that's needed to connect one to another. And for many, it's a simple, inexpensive way to traverse the azure waters of their homeland. And for three teenage boys, Filo, Etueni, and Samu, sailing was a second nature. On October 5th, 2010, as they've done many times, they set sail out for what they thought would be another routine journey of collecting some fish. The boat the boys were using was not a new boat by any means. It was an old hand-me-down which had already been patched over by some of the resources available on the island. It was fairly small, only holding 3 seats on it, with the front having enough of a compartment to hold some fishing gear, and the back having enough room to sit the motor. Little did the boys know, this routine trip across the islands would turn into a harrowing tale of survival. Before they had left the main island to begin their journey, the 3 young boys forgot to check the fuel for the boat, and while they were out traveling between islands, their motor died. Unable to get the motor working, the boys tugged and tugged and tugged on the string, but it never started up. When the boys turned around to see how far the islands were so that they could begin swimming back, they had realized that they had drifted very far away very quickly. They were also acutely aware of the risk that sharks posed all around the island. Close up on the island, they tended to stay away from, but right where the boys were drifting, between the reef of the islands and the vast expanse of the ocean, was perfect bull shark territory, and they didn't feel comfortable starting a swim. As the teens were way too far from the islands to swim back safely, they sat in the boat and watched the islands recede further and further. Out at sea, their boat was now bobbing between the waves. The teens realized the scorching sun was burning their heads, shoulders, and back, yet there was no canopy, and that meant no reprieve from the sun's rays. Taking stock of what they had, the boys had a couple of meager lines of fishing lure as well as a couple snacks for the day's adventures. And, of course, since they only brought enough provisions for one day, after the first, second, and third day, they were completely out of food and water. In order to quench their thirst, the boys relied on sporadic rainfall, and whenever they were lucky, small fly fish would jump onto their boat. However, they were very small, only about 5 inches long for all of them. As days turned into weeks, their situation became dire. The amount of food and water they were getting could not be sustained for any longer. Back on Tokelau, the boys' community grew increasingly concerned. In the beginning days, with no words from the boys, they assumed they might have gotten lost and had hope. But after about a month, hope began to fade. The islanders organized a memorial service, a somber occasion that saw around 500 people, or 1/3 of the population, come together to mourn the presumed loss of the young boys. Meanwhile, the boys clung to life as best as they could. The days consisted of them trying to sing and laugh and tell stories of a better time, looking at the water and hoping to catch anything. The young boys had been out at sea before, but not like this. The massive waves made them feel sick, and oftentimes they spent their nights awake, rustling, trying to get any kind of sleep they could. One of the dark nights out at sea, they saw a bright light just out over the horizon. It was a cruise ship. Unfortunate for them, it never saw them, and it continued to drift endlessly out at sea. The ordeal stretched on for a grueling 50 days. With their strength dwindling and no other options left, they began drinking seawater, a grim indicator of their deteriorating condition. But when all seemed lost, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon. A fishing boat. First thought to be a hallucination, but as it came closer, the sailors on board began shouting to them, and this potential hallucination was reality. This fishing boat was between Samoa and Fiji, which managed to spot this tiny little motorboat adrift in the vast ocean. Eventually, moments later, they were taken aboard and then brought back to a hospital. They were provided with the much-needed medical care, and after being treated in the hospital in Fiji, they managed to return home to Tokelau. All in all, the boys had spent 50 days out at sea, drifting roughly 500 kilometers. That's the end of this video. Thank you so much for listening. If you still are, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel, or even commenting on the video on different topics you'd like to see. I have 1 or 2 other videos planned for individuals lost at sea. Thank you, and have a great rest of your night.